I'm Catherine Deen. I'm the current admissions director of De La Salle College of St. Benilde. I'm also a doctor of education and I am part of the SENIA board. SENIA is actually the special education network in Asia. So it's a network of practitioners, parents across Asia who advocate for students with special learning needs. Yeah, Asperger syndrome is a type of autism, but it's very different from the other types of autism in terms of its presentation. Because for Asperger's syndrome, the difficulty is really in terms of the social functioning. They have a hard time reading nonverbal cues, and so this really affects the social relationships. However, it's very different from other types of autism because they retain their linguistic and their cognitive functioning. Unlike for other cases of autism, they have a hard time also with the cognition as well as language. But for Asperger syndrome, walang problema. No? There's no problem in those areas. But in terms of social functioning, reading cues from friends or from people around them, they kind of have a harder time with that. So it affects their functioning as well. So that's how it affects their lives. So sometimes they can't understand if you're happy with them or you're kind of angry, so they cannot read it as fast as the other people. So it affects their relationships as well. So that's really the difficulty. Well, given that they don't really have any issues with the cognition, it's very easy for them to study. Well, in terms of studying, it's quite easy. It's not difficult for them. A lot of people with Asperger syndrome actually excel in terms of education and their academics. No? However, of course, they have a hard time making friends, gaining friends, and even during in a group setting, sometimes they have a hard time with the social rules in a group setting. So for example, if people have certain expected behaviors in the classroom, for example, or in a party, or maybe in other social situations, since it's kind of difficult for them to function socially, sometimes they behave in an odd manner. Not because they want to be odd, it's just that it's because they have that difficulty. So that's really the main issue that they have to deal with. But of course, there are ways to deal with that, and there are ways for them to handle that. So it's not like, okay, totally hindi na sila magkakaroon ng friends, or they won't ever have friends or good relationships. It is very much possible for people with Asperger syndrome to have friends and to develop friendships, but they need assistance in this area. So for students with Asperger syndrome, they have difficulty with other students, especially when they're doing collaborative work in class, like for example, group work, group project, because sometimes they can be misunderstood by their classmates because they're very different, right? And since they're smart, they kind of have a tendency to kind of lead the group, and sometimes hindi sila masyado sensitive to the feelings of others. Again, not because they're insensitive, but it's just because of the condition that they have. So that's really a difficulty for them, but as I was saying earlier, that it's not for the person with Asperger syndrome to really win over the others. It's more of the others need to also understand the situation of the person with Asperger so that they know what's going on, and then they can understand that sometimes when a person with Asperger says something hurtful or behaves in a certain way that's unexpected, then they will understand that it's nothing personal. It's just really part of the condition. Again, it's not an excuse for a person with Asperger to just say what they want and not care about what other people will think, because they are also trying. But of course, it's a process. So it's like a two-way process of adjustment, but it is not impossible. It is possible to achieve that as long as there's understanding and the environment. There's an acceptance And there's a value for inclusion and the saying that people are welcome, that people can be accepted. And we live in a society where there are different people, diverse in gifts and even difficulties. So it's really also about the culture of whether we are willing to accept and be able to understand and act in certain ways that will propel others to become what they want, or to grow. Because if we will just simply reject people just because we kind of think this is kind of odd, and then we just reject them, then we don't see how truly gifted they can be and how we can truly learn from them as well. Because as I said, first, people with Asperger's syndrome are quite smart, very creative. So if we're not able to work with them and deal with them, we're missing out on that kind of collaboration as well. And for persons with no Asperger's syndrome, if they're able to meaning cooperate, or they're able to work with people with Asperger's syndrome, it also is helpful to them as people and as people, as adults, because when we go out into society, we will meet different types of people and with different kinds of difficulty. Even us, we also have difficulty. So it's really more about, okay, how do we adjust ourselves so that we can live harmoniously and also help each other grow in our lives. Because if we could just shun other people just because they're different, then we are missing out as well, because we are missing out on the beauty of this relationship that we might actually be able to nurture, and we can also learn from them as they learn from us. So it's a two-way street, I believe. But there are difficulties, but this can definitely be faced and hopefully help students grow as they interact. Yeah. Well, people with Asperger's syndrome, as with any other persons, okay, definitely can integrate into society, but they need a lot of support from us, okay, from the school, and they also need support from their parents. They also need support from specialists, like, for example, psychologists, psychiatrists, okay, developmental pediatricians. So all these people who actually study special learning needs and how to help people with Asperger's syndrome transition into career. So there are several transition points in all of our lives, not just for people with Asperger's syndrome, but for all of us. Like, we transition let's say, from high school to college. We also transition from college to work life. And actually, in the Philippines, there are actually laws that protect people with disabilities, because in the Philippines, you can actually get a card if you have a disability. And learning disabilities and these kinds of disabilities are also qualified. So you can actually get that card. You have protection also from the government. So they can definitely transition into society, but they need to advocate for themselves. This is very important, the word advocate, because they are their own advocates. Therefore, they need to know their rights. They need to know what are their special concerns, so that when they meet people, they can actually advocate for themselves. So let's say, for example, if you're a person with Asperger's syndrome, you go to college. Not everybody in the school understands what Asperger's syndrome is. Not everybody will actually believe you that you have it. Some people even think you're just making this up so that it can be an excuse for you. So as a person with Asperger's syndrome, it is your responsibility to advocate for yourself and say, teacher, I have this. I need this kind of support from you. Because if you don't advocate for yourself, you cannot expect them to help you. So you need to have that self-advocacy in you, in every stage of transition you're going through. How do you transition to society? You need to get the skills just as anybody else. You need to advocate for yourself. If you want to find work, you have to go and find work for yourself. Don't make the condition stop you from that. Make it into a gifting. As I believe, you have to go out there and be brave, because if not, then the doors will close on you, because the doors are there and you're not even going to the door, then they're gonna close up on you. So you gotta advocate for yourself, believe in your skills, learn, of course, because if you don't learn, then there's nothing you can offer to society. But if you have the skills, you learn, you're ready, then you can transition to society. You just have to know your rights. Even your employee rights. Like for example, you're finding work. If they don't pick you just because of the condition, then you can actually challenge them because that's discrimination. So you need to know your rights and advocate for yourself.